support of the show and stream. So, big thank you. Okay, for this episode of the show, I'm going to read through War and Peace and Crime and Punishment as part of our continuation of the Russian author series. I read Crime and Punishment yesterday, chapter 2 off stream, so I'll try to do a little recap. And then after this, we'll have our exercise stream for today. Might take a quick break after the reading that I do now. Itchy nose. To eat because I'm a little bit hungry, but it's okay. Alright, we find ourselves in War and Peace chapter 14. I didn't actually read War and Peace yesterday. I just could not get around to it. Sometimes the chapters take a long time, and it's like sometimes I just don't feel like reading a lot. Okay. This series, I don't know, I may discontinue and just finish out the books just on my own, like independent reading. And if so, I'll try to just sub in another series. Like maybe it could make sense to play like Fallout 76 on stream instead, since it seems, based on what I'm seeing, that most of my Twitch audience prefers gaming based streams. It's not that I can't be entertaining reading books or playing piano, it's just that they're not the most entertaining thing for me to do. And yeah, reacting to like online videos is an option I could consider, but I don't know, I'll have to see how everything fits in. I think I'll make my decision following today's stream. If it's not super duper popular, then yeah, I'll just sub out this series for a different type of content. So here we are again, chapter 14. If you are a fan of this series, please let me know, because that's how I know, and I can go from there. Okay. On November 1st, Kutuzov had received through a spy news that the army he commanded was in an almost hopeless position. The spy reported that the French, after crossing the bridge at Vienna, were advancing in immense force upon Kutuzov's line of communication with the troops that were arriving from Russia. If Kutuzov decided to remain at Krems, Napoleon's army of 150,000 men would cut him off completely and surround his exhausted army of 40,000, and he would find himself in the position of Mack at Ulm, quickly routed. If Kutuzov decided to abandon the road connecting him with the troops arriving from Russia, he would have to march with no road into unknown parts of the Bohemian mountains, defending himself against superior forces of the enemy and abandoning all hope of a junction with Buxtehude. And this chapter is shorter, so that should help too. If Kutuzov decided to retreat along the road from Krems to Olmutz to unite with the troops arriving from Russia, he risked being forestalled on that road by the French who had crossed the Vienna Bridge, and encumbered by his baggage and transport, having to accept battle on the march against an enemy 3 times as strong, who would hem him in from two sides. Kutuzov chose this latter course. I guess uniting is what he chose. The French, the spy reported, having crossed the Vienna Bridge, were advanced by forced marches towards Znaim, which lay 66 miles off of the line of Kutuzov's retreat. If he reached Znaim before the French, there would be great hope of saving the army. To let the French forestall him at Znaim meant the exposure of his whole army to a disgrace such as that of Ulm, or to utter destruction. but to forestall the French with his whole army was impossible. The road for the French from Vienna to Znaim was shorter and better than the road for the Russians from Krems to Znaim. The night he received the news, Kutuzov sent Bagration's vanguard, 4,000 strong, to the right across the hills from the Krems-Znaim to the Vienna-Znaim road. Bagration was to make this march without resting and to halt facing Vienna with Znaim to his rear. And if he succeeded in forestalling the French, he was to delay them as long as possible. Kutuzov himself, with all his transport, took the road to Znaim. Marching 30 miles that stormy night across the roadless hills, with his hungry, ill-shod soldiers, and losing a third of his men as stragglers by the way, Bagration came out on the Vienna-Znaim road at Hollabrunn a few hours ahead of the French, who were approaching Hollabrunn from Vienna. Kutuzov, with his transport, had still to march for some days before he could reach Znaim. Hence, Bagration, with his 4,000 hungry, exhausted men, would have to detain for days the whole army that came upon him at Hollabrunn, which was clearly impossible. But a freak of fate might made the impossible possible. The success of the trick that had placed the Vienna bridge in the hands of the French without a fight led Murat to try to deceive Kutuzov in a similar way. Meeting Bagration's weak detachment on the Znaim road, he supposed it to be Kutuzov's whole army. To be able to crush it absolutely, he waited the arrival of the rest of the troops who were on their way from Vienna, and with this object offered a 3 days' truce on condition that both armies should remain in position without moving. Murat declared that negotiations for peace were already proceeding, and that he therefore offered his truce to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Count Nostitz, the Austrian general occupying the advanced post, believed Murat's emissary and retired, leaving Bagration's division exposed. Another emissary rode to the Russian line to announce the peace negotiations and to offer the Russian army the 3 days' truce. Bagration replied that he was not authorized either to accept or refuse a truce, and sent his adjutant to Kutuzov to report the offer he had received. A truce was Kutuzov's sole chance of gaining time, giving Bagration's exhausted troops some rest and letting the transport and heavy convoys, whose movements were concealed from the French, advance if but one stage nearer Znaim. The offer of a truce gave the only and quite unexpected chance of saving the army. On receiving the news, he immediately dispatched Adjutant General Witzengrode, who was in attendance on him, to the enemy camp. Witzengrode was not merely to agree to the truce, but also to offer terms of capitulation. Meanwhile, Kutuzov sent his adjutants back to hasten to the utmost the movements of the baggage trains of the entire army along the Krems-Znaim road. Bagration's exhausted and hungry detachment, which alone covered this movement of the transport and of the whole army, had to remain stationary in face of an enemy 8 times as strong as itself. Kutuzov's expectations that the proposals of capitulation, which were in no way binding, might give time for part of the transport to pass, and also that Murat's mistake would very soon be discovered, proved correct. As soon as Bonaparte, who was at Schönbrunn, 16 miles from Hollabrunn, received Murat's dispatch with the proposal of a truce and a capitulation, he detected a ruse and wrote the following letter to Murat. Schönbrunn, 25th Brumaire, 1805, at 8 o'clock in the morning. To Prince Murat, I cannot find words to express to you my displeasure. You command only my advance guard and have no right to arrange an armistice without my order. You are causing me to lose the fruits of a campaign. Break the armistice immediately and march on the enemy. Inform him that the general who signed the capitulation had no right to do so, and that no one but the Emperor of Russia has that right. If, however, the Emperor of Russia ratifies that convention, I will ratify it, but it is only a trick. March on, destroy the Russian army. You're in a position to seize its baggage and artillery. The Russian Emperor's aide-de-camp is an impostor. Officers are nothing when they have no powers. This one had none. The Austrians let themselves be tricked at the crossing of Vienna Bridge. You are letting yourself be tricked by an aide-de-camp of the Emperor. Napoleon. He's seeing right through him. Napoleon is. Bonaparte's adjutant rode full gallop with his menacing letter to Murat. Bonaparte himself, not trusting to his generals, moved with all the guards to the field of battle, afraid of letting a ready victim escape. Bagration's 4,000 men merely lighted campfires, dried and warmed themselves, cooked their porridge for the first time for 3 days, and not one of them knew or imagined what was in store for him. Napoleon's gonna rock their socks. Okay. And we find ourselves in chapter 3 in Crime and Punishment. It's a doozy, 20 pages I think at least. It's challenging, very challenging. Last time in Crime and Punishment Chapter 2, Raskolnikov caught up with his old... first he disposed of the evidence of the crime that he committed in killing the Ivanovich sisters. And he went to see his friend. What's his name? It's Raskolnikov and Ruzmahin. Yeah, he went to see his friend Ruzmahin. And Ruzmahin basically gives him a job translating. He was not completely unconscious, however. All the time he was ill. He was in a feverish state, sometimes delirious, sometimes half-conscious. He remembered a great deal afterwards. Sometimes it seemed as though there were a number of people around him. They wanted to take him away somewhere. There was a great deal of squabbling and discussing about him. Then he would be alone in the room. They had all gone away from him, afraid of him, and only now and then opened a door cracked to look at him. They threatened him, plotted something together, laughed, and mocked at him. He remembered Nastasi often at his bedside. He distinguished another person, too, whom he seemed to know very well, though he could not remember who he was, and this fretted him, even made him cry. Sometimes he fancied he had been lying there a month. At times, they all seemed part of the same day. But of that he had no recollection. Yet every minute he felt that he had forgotten something he ought to remember. He worried and tormented himself trying to remember, moaned, flew into a rage, or sank into an awful, intolerable terror. Then he struggled to get up, would have run away, but someone always prevented him by force, and he sank back into impotence and forgetfulness. At last he returned to complete consciousness. It happened at 10 o'clock in the morning. On fine days the sun shone into the room at that hour, throwing a streak of light on the right wall in the corner near the door. Nastasi was standing beside him with another person, a complete stranger who was looking at him very inquisitively. He was a young man with a beard, wearing a full, short-waisted coat, and looked like a messenger. The landlady was peeping in at the half-open door. Raskolnikov sat up. "Who is this, Nastasi?" he asked, pointing to the young man. "I say, he's himself again," she said. "He is himself," echoed the man. Concluding that he would return to his senses, the landlady closed the door and disappeared. She was always shy and dreaded conversations or discussions. She was a woman of 40, not at all bad-looking, fat and buxom, with black eyes and eyebrows, good-natured from fatness and laziness, and absurdly bashful. "Who are you?" he went on, addressing the man. But at that moment the door was flung open, and, stooping a little, as he was so tall, Ruzmahin came in. That's his university buddy who gave him the job translating the German books. Yeah, I don't really know why Ruzmahin needs the books, but we can read on and see if it's real. "What a cabinet it is," he cried. "I'm always knocking my head. You call this a lodging, so you're conscious, brother. I've just heard the news from Pershenka." "He's just come too," said Nastasia. "Just come too," echoed the man again with a smile. "And who are you?" Ruzmahin asked, suddenly addressing him. "My name is Vrasmahin, at your service. Not Razmahin, as I'm always called, but Vrasmahin." They do sound alike. "A student and gentleman, and he is my friend. And who are you?" What does he mean, he? Is he talking about Raskolnikov? I don't know. "I'm the messenger from our office, from the merchant Shelopev, and I've come on business." "Please sit down." Razmahin seated himself on the other side of the table. "It's a good thing you've come too, brother," he went on to Raskolnikov. "For the last 4 days you've scarcely eaten or drunk anything. We had to give you..." Empty bottle. Spooky. Okay. Where was I? He hadn't eaten anything. "We had to give you tea in spoonfuls. I brought Zosimov to see you twice. You remember Zosimov? He examined you carefully and said at once it was nothing serious. Something seemed to have gone to your head. Some nervous nonsense, the result of bad feeding. He says that you've not had enough beer and radish, but it's nothing much. It will pass and you'll be all right. Zosimov is a first-rate fellow. He's making quite a name. Come, I won't keep you, he said, addressing the man again. Will you explain what you want? You must know, Rodya, that this is the second time they have sent from the office. But it was another man last time, and I talked to him. Who was it came before? That was the day before yesterday, I ventured to say. If you please, sir, that was Alexei Semyonovich. He is in our office, too. He was more intelligent than you, don't you think so? Yes, indeed, sir. He is of more weight than I am. Quite so, go on. At your mamma's request, through Afanasy Ivanovich Verushin, of whom I presume you have heard more than once, a remittance is sent to you from our office. The man began, addressing Raskolnikov. If you are in an intelligible condition, I have 35 rubles to remit to you, as Semyon Semyonovich has received from Afanasy Ivanovich, at your mamma's request, instructions to that effect, as on previous occasions. Do you know him, sir? Yes, I remember. Verushin, Raskolnikov said dreamily. You hear he knows Verushin, cried Razumihin. He's in intelligible condition. And I see that you are an intelligent man, too. It's always pleasant to hear words of wisdom. That's the gentleman Verushin, Afanasy Ivanovich, and at the request of your mamma, who has sent you a remittance once before in the same manner through him, he did not refuse this time. Also sent instructions to Semyon Semyonovich some days since to hand you 35 rubles in the hope you better come. And the hope of better to come. That hoping for better to come is the best thing you said, though your mamma is not bad either. Come then, what do you say? Is he fully conscious, huh? That's all right, if only he can sign this little paper. He can scrawl his name. Have you got the book? Yes, here's the book. Give it to me here. Give it to me. Here, Rodya, sit up. I'll hold you. Take the pen and scribble Raskolnikov for him. For just now, brother, money is sweeter dust than treacle. Treacle. Hold on a second. It's like molasses. Oh, it's also flattery, though. Cloying sentimentality. Money is better than sweet words, basically. I don't want it, said Raskolnikov, pushing away the pen. Not want it. I won't sign it. How the devil can you do without signing it? I don't want the money. Don't want the money? Come, brother, that's nonsense. I bear witness. Don't trouble, please. It's only that he's on his travels again. But that's pretty common with him all the times, though. With him at all times, though. You are a man of judgment, and we will take him in hand. That is, more simply, take his hand and he will sign it here. But it can come another time. No, why should we trouble you? You're a man of judgment. Now, Rodya, don't keep your visitor. You see he's waiting. And he made ready to hold Raskolnikov's hand in earnest. Stop, I'll do it alone, said the latter, taking the pen and signing his name. The messenger took out the money and went away. Bravo! And now, brother, are you hungry? Yes, answered Raskolnikov. Is there any soup? Some of yesterday's, answered Nastasia, who was still standing there. With potatoes and rice in it? Yes, I know by heart. Bring soup and give us some tea. Very well. Raskolnikov looked at all this with profound astonishment and a dull, unreasoning terror. He made up his mind to keep quiet and see what would happen. I believe I'm not wandering. I believe it's reality, he thought. In a couple of minutes, Nastasia returned with the soup and announced that the tea would be ready directly. With the soup, he brought 2 spoons, 2 plates, salt, pepper, mustard for beef, and so on. The table was set as it had not been for a long time. The cloth was clean. It would not be amiss, Nastasia Perskova Pavlovna was to set up a couple of bottles of beer. We could empty them. Well, you are a cool hand, muttered Nastasia as she departed to carry out his orders. Raskolnikov still gazed wildly with strained attention. Meanwhile, Razumihin sat down on the sofa beside him, as clumsily as a bear put his left arm around Raskolnikov's head. Although he was able to sit up, and with his right hand gave him a spoonful of soup, blowing on it that it might not burn him. But the soup is only just warm. Raskolnikov swallowed 1 spoonful greedily, then a second, and then a third. After giving him a few more spoonfuls of soup, Razumihin suddenly stopped, and said that he must ask Zosimov whether he ought to have more. He hasn't really been acting normally since the murders. So, yeah, everyone just thinks he's sick. And Nastasia came home with 2 bottles of beer. We have tea? Yes, cut along. Nastasia, bring some tea. For tea, we may venture on without the faculty. But here's the beer. He moved back to his chair, pulled the soup and meat in front of him, began eating as though he had not touched food for 3 days. I must tell you, Roja, I dine like this here every day now, he mumbled with his mouth full of beef, and it's all Pashenka, your dear little landlady who sees to that. She loves to do anything for me. I don't ask for it, but of course I don't object. And here's Nastasia with the tea. She's a quick girl. Nastasia, my dear, won't you have some beer? Get along with your nonsense. Cup of tea, then? A cup of tea, maybe. Pour it out. Stay, I'll pour it out myself. Sit down. He poured out 2 cups, left his dinner, and sat on the sofa again. As before, he put his left arm around the sick man's head, raised him up, and gave him tea in spoonfuls, again blowing each spoonful steadily and earnestly, as though this process was the principal and most effective means toward his friend's recovery. Raskolnikov said nothing and made no resistance, though he felt quite strong enough to sit upon the sofa without support, and could not merely have held a cup or a spoon, but even perhaps could have walked about. But from some queer, almost animal cunning, he conceived the idea of hiding his strength and lying low for a time, pretending, if necessary, not to be yet in full possession of his faculties, meanwhile listening to find out what was going on. We already know by this point in the novel that Raskolnikov is good at hiding stuff. He hid the axe in his overcoat. He stole a bunch of junk from Alia Ivanovich after she died, which he also kept in his coat. He buried it under the rock. He's good at also concealing like what he thinks. Like he was in the police station and he thought that they were gonna get him for the murder, but it turns out it was just an IOU. Yeah. He could not overcome his sense of repugnance. After sipping a dozen spoonfuls of tea, he suddenly released his head, pushed the spoon away capriciously, and sank back on the pillow. There were actually real pillows under his head now, down pillows in clean cases. He observed that too and took note of it. Pashenka must give us some raspberry jam today to make him some raspberry tea, said Razumhin, going back to his chair and attacking his soup and beer again. And where's she to get raspberries for you? Asked Nastasia, balancing a saucer on her 5 outspread fingers and sipping tea through a lump of sugar. She'll get it at the shop, my dear. You see, Rodya, all sorts of things have been happening while you've been laid up. When you decamped in that rascally way without leaving your address, I felt so angry that I resolved to find you out and punish you. I set to work that very day. How I ran about making inquiries for you. This lodging of yours I'd forgotten, though I never remembered it, indeed because I did not know it. And as for your old lodgings, I can only remember it was at the 5 Corners, Harlamov's house. I kept trying to find that Harlamov's house, and afterwards it turned out that it was not Harlamov's but Buck's. How one muddles up sounds sometimes. So I lost my temper, and I went on the chance to the address bureau the next day. And only fancy in 2 minutes they'd looked you up. Your name's down there. So it's like that day's equivalent of the phone book. My name. I should think so, and yet a General Koblev they could not find while I was there. Well, it's a long story, but as soon as I did land on this place, I soon got to know all your affairs. All, brother, I know everything. Nastasi here will tell you. He made the acquaintance of Nikodem Fomich and Ilya Petrovich. Those are the police officers. And the house porter and Mr. Zarmatov. Alexander Grigovich, the head clerk in the police office, and last but not least, a Pashenka. Nastasi here knows. He's got round her, Nastasia murmured, smiling slyly. Why do you put sugar in your tea, Nastasia Nikiforovna? You are a one, Nastasia cried suddenly, going off into a giggle. I am not Nikiforovna, but Petrovna, she added suddenly, recovering from her mirth. I'll make a note of it. Well, brother, to make a long story short, I was going in for a regular explosion here to uproot all malignant influences in the locality, but Pashenka won the day. I had not expected, brother, to find her so prepossessing. What do you think? Raskolnikov did not speak, but he still kept his eyes fixed upon him, full of alarm. And all that could be wished, indeed, in every respect, Razumhin went on, not at all embarrassed by his silence. Ah, the sly dog, Nastasia shrieked again. This conversation afforded her unspeakable delight. It's a pity, brother, that you did not set to work in the right way at first. You ought to have approached her differently. She is, so to speak, a most unaccountable character, but we will talk about her character later. How could you let things to come? How could you let things come to such a pass that she gave up sending you your dinner, and that IOU? You must have been mad to sign an IOU, and that promise of marriage when her daughter Natalia Yugorovna was alive. I know all about it, but I see that's a delicate matter, and I'm an ass. Forgive me. But talking of foolishness, do you know Praskovia Pavlovna is not nearly so foolish as you would think at first sight? Fyodor has a tendency where it's like characters don't see each other for a long time, and then they like see each other again for a long time from a long time before, and they just go on and on and on and on and on. Like his mom's letter to him was the same way, where it's like they have not seen each other for 3 years, and they literally just go through the laundry list of all the things that have happened in that time. It just gets tedious, Fyodor. It's like quicker conversations. No, mumbled Raskolnikov, looking away, but feeling that it was better to keep up the conversation. This whole time, too, Raskolnikov is kind of like, he's kind of still sick. So, like, he's definitely not acting normal. She isn't, is she? Cried Razumhin, delighted to get an answer out of him. And Raskolnikov's always been, like, a little antisocial, so it's like, yeah, it should be, like, really obvious when he's acting different. But she's not very clever either. She's essentially an unaccountable character. I'm sometimes quite a loss, I assure you. She must be 40. She says she is 36. Of course, she's every right to say so. I swear I judge her intellectually, simply from the metaphysical point of view. There's a sort of symbolism sprung up between us, a sort of algebra or whatnot. I don't understand it. Well, that's all nonsense. Uh-huh. Only seeing that you are not a student now, and have lost your lessons in your cloaks, and that through the young lady's death she has no need to treat you as a relation. She suddenly took fright, and as you hid in your den and dropped all your old relations with her, she planned to get rid of you. She's been cherishing that design a long time, but was sorry to lose the IOU, for you assured her yourself that your mother would pay. It was base of me to say that. My mother herself is almost a beggar. And I told a lie to keep my lodging and be fed, Raskolnikov said loudly and distinctly. Yes, you did very sensibly, but the worst of it is that at that point Mr. Chebarov turns up, a businessman. Pashenka would never have thought of doing anything on her own account. She's too retiring. But the businessman is by no means retiring. The first thing he puts to the question, is there any hope of releasing the IOU? The answer is that there is, because he has a mother who would save her Rodya with her 125 rubles pension. She has to starve herself and sister too, who would go into bondage for his sake. That's what he was building upon. Why do you start? I know all the ins and outs of your affairs now, my dear boy. It's not for nothing that you were so open with Pashenka when you were her prospective son-in-law. And I say all this as a friend, but I tell you what it is, an honest and sensitive man is open, and a businessman listens and goes on eating you up. Well, then she gave the IOU by way of payment to this Chebarov. Without hesitation, he made a formal demand for payment. When I heard of all this, I wanted to blow him up too, to clear my conscience, but by that time, harmony reigned between me and Pashenka, and I insisted on stopping the whole affair, engaging that you would pay. I want security for you, brother. Do you understand? We called Chebarov, flung him 10 rubles, and got the IOU back from him, and here I have the honor of presenting it to you. She trusts your word now. Here, take it. You see I've torn it. Razumhin put the note on the table. Raskolnikov looked at him and turned to the wall without uttering a word. Like, that's how he is. Like, I don't understand why he just keeps babbling on and on and on. Even Razumhin felt a twinge. I see, brother, he said a moment later, that I have been playing the fool again. You think? I thought I should amuse you with my chatter, and I believe I've only made you cross. You just keep talking and talking and talking, like... And Raskolnikov's like, just giving him the strange look like... like, you gotta read who you're talking to. Was it you I did not recognize when I was delirious? Raskolnikov asked, after a moment's pause without turning his head. Yes, and you flew into a rage about it, especially when I brought Zametov one day. Zametov, the head clerk? What for? Raskolnikov turned around quickly and fixed his eyes on Razumhin. What's the matter with you? What are you upset about? He wanted to make your acquaintance because I talked to him a lot about you. How could I have found out so much except from him? He's a capital fellow, brother, first rate, in his own way, of course. Now we're friends, see each other almost every day. I moved into this part, you know. I've only just moved. I've been with him to Luis Ivanovna once or twice. Do you remember Luis Ivanovna? Did I say anything in delirium? I should think so. You were beside yourself. What did I rave about? What next? What did you rave about? What people do rave about? Well, brother, now I must not lose time to work. He got up from the table and took up his cap. What did I rave about? How he keeps on. Are you afraid of having let out some secret? Don't worry yourself. You said nothing about a countess. But he said a lot about a bulldog and about earrings and chains and about Krastovsky Island and some porter, Nikodym Fomitch and Ilya Petrovich, and the assistant superintendent. And another thing that was of special interest to you was your own sock. You wanted, give me my sock. Zametov hunted all about your room for your socks. And with his own scented ring-bedecked fingers, he gave you the rack. And only then were you comforted. And for the next 24 hours, you held the wretched thing in your hand. You cannot get it from me. It is most likely somewhere under your quilt at this moment. And then you ask so piteously for fringe for your trousers. You try to find out what sort of fringe, but you cannot make it out. Not a business. Here are 35 rubles. I take 10 of them, and shall give you an account of them in an hour or two. I'll let Zosimov know at the same time. He ought to have been here long ago, for it's nearly 12. And you, Nastasi, look in pretty often while I'm away, to see whether he wants drink or anything else. I'll tell Pashenka what it is wanted myself. Goodbye. He calls her Pashenka. He's a deep one, said Nastasi as he went out. Then she opened the door, stopped, and stood listening, but could not resist running downstairs after him. She was very eager to hear what he would say to the landlady. She was evidently quite fascinated by Razmahin. No sooner had she left the room than the sick man flung off the bedclothes and leapt out of bed like a madman. With burning, twitching impatience, he had waited for them to be gone so that he might set to work. But to what work? Now, as though to spite him, it eluded him. Good God, only tell me one thing. Do they know it or not? Well, if they do know, they're not saying anything about it. So, much like you, they're good at keeping their secrets. What if they know it and they're only pretending, mocking me while I'm laid up? They will come in, tell me what's been discovered long ago and that they've only... what am I to do now? That's what I've forgotten, as though on purpose. Forgotten it all at once. I remembered a minute ago. Like an old person. He stood in the middle of the room and gazed in miserable bewilderment about him. Like, what? Why is it I came in here? What did I come in here for? Suddenly, as though recalling something, he rushed to the corner where there was a hole under the paper, began examining it, put his hand into the hole, fumbled, but that was not it. He went to the stove, opened it, and began rummaging the ashes. The frayed edges of his trousers and the rags cut out of his pocket were lying there just as he had thrown them. No one had looked then. Then he remembered the sock about which Razmahin had just been telling him. Yes, there it lay on the sofa under the quilt, but it was so covered with dust and grime that Zametov could not have seen anything on it. Bah, Zametov, the police office. Why am I sent to the police office? Where's the notice? Bah. I'm mixing up. That was then. I looked at my sock then too, but now I've been ill. But what did Zametov come for? Why did Razmahin bring him? He muttered helplessly, sitting on the sofa again. What does it mean? Am I still in delirium, or is it real? I believe it is real. I remember. I must escape. Make haste to escape. Yes, I must escape. But where? Where are my clothes? I have no boots. They've taken them away. They've hidden them. I understand. Here's my coat. They passed that over. Here's the money on the table, thank God. And here's the IOU. I'll take the money and go and take another lodging. They won't find me, yes, but the address bureau. They'll find me. Razmahin will find me. Better escape altogether, far away to America. Let them do their worst. Take the IOU. Be of use there. What else shall I take? They think I'm ill. They don't know that I can walk. Ha ha ha. I could see by their eyes that they know all about it. If only I could get downstairs. And what if they've set a watch there? Policeman, what is this tea? And here's the beer left. Half a bottle, cold. He snatched up the bottle, which still contained a glass full of beer, and gulped it down with relish, as though quenching a flame in his breast. But in another minute, the beer had gone to his head, and a faint and even pleasant shiver ran down his spine. He lay down and pulled the quilt over him. His sick and incoherent thoughts grew more and more disconnected, and soon a light, pleasant drowsiness came upon him. With a sense of comfort, he nestled his head into the pillow, wrapped more closely about him the soft, wadded quilt which he had replaced the old ragged greatcoat, sighed softly, and sank into a deep, sound, refreshing sleep. He woke up hearing someone come in. He opened his eyes and saw Razmahin standing in the doorway, uncertain whether to come in or not. Raskolnikov sat up quickly on the sofa and gazed at him as though trying to recall something. Ah, you're not asleep. Here I am. Nastasia, bring in the parcel. Razumhin shouted down the stairs. You shall have the account directly. What time is it? Asked Raskolnikov, looking around uneasily. Yes, you had a fine sleep, brother. It's almost evening. It'll be 6 o'clock directly. You slept more than 6 hours. Good heavens, have I? Why not? It'll do you good. What's the hurry? A tryst, is it? We've all the time before us. I've been waiting for the last 3 hours for you. I've been up twice and found you asleep. I've called on Zazimov twice, not at home, only fancy. No matter, he'll turn up. I've been out on my own business too. You know, I've been moving today, moving with my uncle. I have an uncle living with me now, but that's no matter to business. He just mentioned the most random stuff. He's like, oh, by the way, my uncle moved in. Give me the parcel, Nastasia. We will open it directly. How do you feel now, brother? I'm quite well, but I'm not ill. Razumhin, have you been here long? I tell you I've been waiting for the last 3 hours. No, before that. How do you mean? How long have you been coming here? Why, I told you about it all this morning. Don't you remember? Raskolnikov pondered. The morning seemed like a dream to him. He could not remember alone, and looked inquiringly at Razumhin. Said the latter. He has forgotten. I fancied then that you were not quite yourself. Now you're better for your sleep. You really look much better. First rate. All to business. Look here, dear boy. He began untying the bundle, which evidently interested him. Believe me, brother, this is something specially near my heart. For we must make a man of you. Let's make a man out of you. Let's get down to business. Let's begin from the top. He actually says, let's begin from the top. Do you see this cap? He said, taking out the bundle, fairly good, though cheap and ordinary cap. Let me try it on. Presently afterwards, said Raskolnikov, waving off pettishly. Come, Rodya, my boy, don't oppose it. Afterwards will be too late, and I shan't sleep all night, for I bought it by guess, without measure. Just right, he cried triumphantly, fitting it on. Just your size. Proper head covering is the first thing in dress, and a recommendation in its own way. Tolstokov, a friend of mine, is always obliged to take off his pudding basin when he goes into any public place where other people wear their hats or caps. People think he does it from slavish politeness, but simply because he's ashamed of his bird's nest. He's such a boastful fellow. Look, Nastasi, here are 2 specimens of headgear. The Palmerston, he took it from the corner of Raskolnikov's old battered hat, which for some unknown reason he called a Palmerston, or this jewel. Guess the price, Rodya. What do you suppose I paid for it, Nastasia? He said, turning to her, seeing that Raskolnikov did not speak. 20 kopecks, no more, I dare say, answered Nastasia. 20 kopecks, silly, cried offended. Why, nowadays you would cost more than that, 80 kopecks. And that's only because it has been worn, and it's bought on condition that when it's worn out, they'll give you another next year. On my word, well, now let's pass to the United States of America, as they call them at school. I assure you I'm proud of these breeches. And he exhibited to Raskolnikov a pair of light summer trousers of gray wool material. Yeah, be right back. I got these budget. As Razumhin's continuously coming back. Okay, I'm back. Alright. Yeah, Razumhin just keeps going on and on and on. That's the reason why this chapter is 20 pages long. Okay. holes, no spots. Quite respectable, though a little worn. And a waistcoat to match, quite in fashion. And it's being worn really is an improvement. It's softer, smoother. You see, Roja, to my thinking, the great thing for getting on in the world is always trying to keep to the seasons. You don't insist on having asparagus in January, you keep your money in your purse. It's the same with this purchase. It's summer now, so I've been buying summer things. Warm materials will be wanted for autumn. So we'll have to throw these away in any case, especially as they will be done for by then from their own lack of coherence, not for your higher standard of luxury. Come, price them. What do you say? 2 rubles, 25 kopecks. Remember the condition. If you wear these out, you will have another suit for nothing. They only do business on that system at Fedyev's. You bought a thing once, you're satisfied for life. For you will never go there again on your own free will. Now for the boots. What do you say? You see that they're a bit worn, but they'll last a couple of months. For it's foreign work and foreign leather. The Secretary of English Embassy sold them last week. He only worn them 6 days, but he was very short of cash. Price, 1.5 rubles, a bargain. Like, he sees that Raskolnikov's in worn out clothes and he's trying to take advantage of the situation. It's like, how about buying these clothes? He's like a traveling thrift store. A traveling thrift shop. Perhaps they won't fit, observed Nastasi. Not fit, just look. He pulled out his pocket Raskolnikov's old broken boot, stiffly coated with dry mud. I did not go empty-handed. They took the size from this monster. We all did our best. As to your linen, your landlady has seen to that. Here, to begin with, here are 3 shirts. Hempen, but with a fashionable front. Well, now then, 80 kopecks the cap, 2 rubles, 25 kopecks the suit. Together, 3 rubles, 5 kopecks, 1.5 rubles for the boots. You see, they're very good, and that makes 40 rubles, 45 kopecks. 5 rubles for the underclothes. They were brought in the low, which makes exactly 9 rubles, 55 kopecks. 45 kopecks change in coppers. Will you take it? So, Roja, you're set up with a complete new rig out, for your overcoat will serve. It even has a style of its own. That comes from getting one's clothes from Sharmers. As for your socks and other things, I leave them to you. We've 25 rubles left. As for Pashenka and paying for your lodging, don't you worry. Tell you she'll trust you for anything. And now, brother, let me change your linen, and I dare say I'll throw off your illness with your shirt. That's not how it works, Rasmussen, but okay. Let me be. I don't want to, Raskolnikov waved him off. He listened with disgust to Rasmussen's efforts to be playful about his purchases. Come, brother, don't tell me I've been trudging around for nothing, Rasmussen insisted. Nastasia, don't be bashful, but help me, that's it. In spite of Raskolnikov's resistance, he changed his linen. The latter sank back into the pillows and for a minute or two said nothing. It'll be long before I get rid of them, he thought. What money was all that bought with? He asked at last, gazing at the wall. Money? Why, your own. What the messenger brought from Baruchin. Your mother sent it. Have you forgotten that too? I remember now, said Raskolnikov after a long silence. Rasmussen looked at him, frowning and uneasy. The door opened and a tall, stout man whose appearance seemed familiar to Raskolnikov came in. Raskolnikov's like, dang it. I'm going to have to add 3 bodies to my, to my belt. My body count. Redmond, like, I don't know, like spending someone else's money without consulting them seems like a bad call. I don't know, and Raskolnikov, it's like, I don't know, he's just been a weird way. Like, ever since the murders, he's been a weird way. Like, he's been either sick or acting like a drunk person. So we'll have to see how chapter 4 goes for him. I have the haunting suspicion that the cops are going to arrest him pretty soon when they figure out he did the crime. Okay. That does it for today's reading. Crime and Punishment much longer than War and Peace today. Holy cow. We'll be right back with the fitness stream. Thank you for watching.